The bitter wind howled across the frozen landscape of planet K419, tearing at the damaged hull of the exploration vessel Horizon. Inside the rapidly cooling ship, Lieutenant James Miller fought against unconsciousness, his head throbbing from where it had struck the control panel during the crash. The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow throughout the cockpit. James pulled himself up from the floor, wincing at the pain in his ribs. The ship's main viewport showed nothing but swirling snow and darkness. He checked the life signs of his crew members, but the readings confirmed his worst fears. He was the only survivor. "Computer, status report," he croaked, tasting blood in his mouth. "Critical damage to all systems. Life support failing. Hull breach in sectors 3 through 7. External temperature, -80 degrees Celsius and dropping." The computer's voice crackled through damaged speakers. James stumbled to the emergency supply locker, pulling out a thermal suit. His hand shook as he checked his personal life support unit. It was damaged, with only 4 hours of heat remaining. On this frozen world, that meant death was certain once it failed. "Computer, how long until nightfall?" "Local night will occur in approximately 3 hours. Warning, nighttime temperatures regularly reach -120 degrees Celsius." James felt his heart race. The thermal suit alone wouldn't protect him from those temperatures. He needed shelter, and fast. The ship's remaining systems were failing one by one, and the hull breach meant the vessel would soon become a frozen tomb. Gathering what supplies he could carry, emergency rations, a portable scanner, and basic tools, James prepared to venture outside. The ship's scanner had picked up something before they crashed. Some kind of structure, maybe 2 kilometers to the north. "Computer, send out an emergency beacon. Authorization Miller 749. Beacon activated. Warning, atmospheric interference may reduce signal strength by 80%. James sealed his helmet and activated the thermal suit. Even with its protection, the cold bit into him as he opened the emergency hatch. The wind nearly knocked him off his feet as he stepped onto the planet's surface. Snow and ice crystals stung the exposed sections of his visor. He checked his handheld scanner. Through the interference, a faint signal pulsed, definitely artificial, and definitely in the direction the ship's sensors had indicated. With no other choice, James began trudging through the knee-deep snow. The journey was brutal. Every step required immense effort, and the wind seemed determined to push him backward. His suit's heating system worked overtime, but he could still feel the cold seeping in. The scanner's battery was draining faster than it should, affected by the extreme temperature. After what felt like hours but was probably only 40 minutes, James saw something through the swirling snow. A dark shape, too regular to be natural. His scanner confirmed it. Some kind of outpost or research station. But the readouts were strange. The power signature didn't match any known human technology. As he got closer, he could make out more details. The structure was built low against the ground, its surfaces smooth and curved, designed to deflect the fierce winds. It looked almost organic, like a giant shell half buried in the ice. James's suit beeped a warning. Only 2 hours of heat remaining. The sun was already setting, painting the snow in deep purples and blues. He needed to find a way inside. Fast. That's when he saw it, a soft glow through what appeared to be a viewport. Someone or something was inside. His heart leaped with hope, then immediately filled with apprehension. This far from human space, who, or what, could be out here? Another warning from his suit. The temperature was dropping even faster now. James had no choice. He moved toward what looked like an airlock, raising his hand to the control panel beside it. As he did so, his scanner picked up movement inside the structure. Something large was moving toward the airlock. James held his breath, his hand hovering over the panel. Whatever waited inside, it had to be better than freezing to death in the rapidly approaching night. With a silent prayer, he pressed his hand against the alien controls. The airlock hissed open, and a blast of warm air enveloped James. Before he could step inside, something grabbed him and yanked him through the doorway. He found himself slammed against an interior wall, face to face with his captor. James's eyes widened behind his visor. The creature before him stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in thick, silvery fur. Its face was vaguely feline, with amber eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. Despite its fierce appearance, it wore what appeared to be some kind of laboratory coat. "Why are you here, human?" The creature's voice was surprisingly melodic, though filled with suspicion. Its grip on James's suit remained firm. "My ship crashed," James managed to say, still stunned by the alien's appearance. "I'm the only survivor. Please, my suit's running out of power." The alien released him, but blocked the corridor with its massive frame. "Remove your helmet. The air here is compatible with your biology. I've studied your kind." James hesitated, then complied. The air was warm and slightly sweet-smelling. The alien watched him intently, its ears twitching. "I am lead researcher Kira," the alien said, moving to a control panel. "This is my research station. I'm the only one here." James realized the voice was feminine, tapped several commands into the panel. "Your arrival is inconvenient. I'm Lieutenant James Miller. I'm sorry for intruding, but—" "Quiet," Kira interrupted, studying readings on a screen. "The storm is getting worse. Night is coming." She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Your thermal suit is failing. You have perhaps an hour of protection left." James nodded, trying to hide his growing anxiety. "Is there any way I could shelter here until rescue comes?" Kira's ears flattened against her head. The station's main heating system was damaged in last week's storm. Only my personal quarters remain properly heated. She paused, seeming to debate with herself. "The temperature in the rest of the station will drop to lethal levels for your species within 2 hours. There must be something," James started, but Kira cut him off with a growl. "You don't understand. This planet's nights are deadly. The temperature will drop far below what your species can survive. Even with your suit, the only properly heated space is my sleeping quarters." James felt his face grow warm despite the situation. "Oh, I can try to repair the main heating system." Kira let out a sound that might have been a laugh. "In 2 hours? Impossible. Even I haven't managed to fix it yet." She stepped closer, towering over him. "You have 2 choices, human. Share my quarters or die. My species is built for this environment. We share body heat to survive the worst storms." The situation was surreal. James had expected many things when he joined the Exploration Corps, but being ordered into bed by a giant alien cat scientist wasn't one of them. "What about rescue?" he asked. "My ship sent out a distress signal." "No rescue ships could land in this storm," Kira said matter-of-factly. "And no signals are getting through that interference. You're stuck here until morning, at least." She turned and started walking down the corridor. "Follow me. My quarters are this way. Unless you prefer freezing to death." James grabbed his emergency pack and hurried after her. The station's corridors were lined with scientific equipment he didn't recognize. Through various viewports, he could see the storm intensifying outside. "What exactly do you research out here?" he asked, trying to make conversation. Kira glanced back at him. "That's classified information. Though," she paused, her tail twitching thoughtfully, "given our current situation, perhaps we'll have time to discuss it, if you behave." They reached a sealed door marked with symbols James couldn't read. The temperature had already begun to drop noticeably in the corridor. "Last chance to choose, human," Kira said, her hand on the door's control panel. "Get in my bed, or you won't survive the night." James stood in Kira's quarters, taking in his surroundings. The room was surprisingly cozy, with curved walls covered in what looked like thermal insulation. Various scientific instruments and data pads were scattered across several workstations. A large sleeping platform dominated one corner, covered in soft-looking materials. "Your thermal suit," "Remove it," Kira commanded, already shrugging off her laboratory coat. Underneath, her silver fur gleamed in the warm lighting. "It's damaged and will only get in the way of proper heat transfer." James fumbled with the suit's clasps, trying to maintain his professional composure. "I appreciate your help, but maybe we could just—" "Listen carefully, human," Kira interrupted, her ears flicking in what seemed like annoyance. "My species evolved on this planet. We understand survival. When the deep cold comes, we share warmth or we die. This isn't about whatever awkward social concerns are running through your mind right now." As if to emphasize her point, a deep rumble shook the station. The storm was getting worse. James checked his suit's external temperature reading before removing it. -100 degrees and still dropping. "Keep your underclothing on," Kira said, noting his hesitation. "I'm a scientist, not a savage. Though I admit, having a human subject to study is interesting." She moved to one of her workstations, making some quick notes on a datapad. James, now in his basic flight suit, felt exposed. "You've studied humans before." "Theoretical studies only. Your species rarely ventures this far into deep space." Kira's tail swished back and forth. "Your crash might actually benefit my research. I have many questions about human physiology and behavior." Another tremor shook the station. The lights flickered briefly. "The station's taking a beating," James observed, trying to keep his voice steady. "Are you sure we're safe here?" Kira's ears perked up. "Worried, human. My quarters are the most fortified section of the station. Now, into the bed. Your body temperature is already dropping." James approached the sleeping platform cautiously. It was larger than he expected, probably designed to accommodate Kira's size. The covering material felt like a cross between fur and silk. "How exactly does this work?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the platform. Kira made a sound that might have been a sigh. "Lie down. My fur is designed to trap and distribute heat. I will curl around you." The position might seem intimate by human standards, but it's purely practical. James lay down, feeling more than a little surreal about the situation. Kira moved with surprising grace for her size, settling beside him and wrapping her large frame around his smaller one. Her fur was incredibly soft, and the warmth radiating from her body was immediate and comforting. "Your heart rate is elevated," Kira observed clinically. "Stress response, fear, or something else?" "Maybe all of the above," James admitted. "This isn't exactly a situation covered in our first contact protocols." Kira made a rumbling sound that might have been laughter. "Perhaps it should be. Space is cold, human. Survival often requires setting aside preconceptions." She shifted slightly, one large arm draped over him protectively. "Now, while we wait out the storm, you can help me with my research. Tell me about your species' thermal regulation systems." James couldn't help but smile at her persistent scientific curiosity. "You're really going to turn this into a research opportunity?" "Of course. I never waste a chance to gather data." Her voice took on a more serious tone. "Besides, talking will help keep you alert. The next few hours will be dangerous, even with our shared warmth. The cold here, it can affect the mind." Outside, the storm howled with increasing fury. The temperature in the rest of the station was plummeting. But here, wrapped in Kira's warm fur, James felt oddly safe. Even so, he couldn't shake the feeling that this night would bring more challenges than just surviving the cold. "So," Kira said, her scientific interest evident in her voice, "tell me about your species' heat retention capabilities. And in return, I might share some information about my own research here. After all, we have a long night ahead of us." Hours passed in Kira's quarters as the storm raged outside. The temperature throughout the rest of the station had dropped to lethal levels, but within their shared space, James found himself surprisingly comfortable, wrapped in the alien scientist's warm fur. "Your species' thermal regulation is quite inefficient," Kira noted, making another entry in her data pad with her free hand. It's remarkable you've survived space exploration at all. We make up for it with technology, James replied, trying to ignore how natural it felt to be curled up against her. Though right now, I'll admit your way has its advantages. A violent tremor shook the station, stronger than the previous ones. Warning lights flashed across Kira's workstation displays. That's not good, she muttered, her ears flattening. The station's structural integrity is being compromised faster than expected. She shifted, pulling up more detailed readings on her nearest screen. The main power core is struggling. James tried to sit up, but Kira held him firmly in place. Let me help. I have engineering experience. You can't leave this bed, she growled. The temperature out there would kill you in minutes. Besides, she paused, her ears twitching. I need you here for my research. Another tremor rattled the room. This time, several pieces of equipment crashed to the floor. Your research might not matter if the station fails, James argued. At least tell me what's wrong with the main systems. Maybe I can talk you through repairs. Kira was quiet for a moment, her tail twitching thoughtfully. The cold isn't just affecting the station's systems. There's something else, something I've been studying. It's why I'm here alone. James felt her body tense around him. What do you mean? This planet's storms, they're not natural. There's a pattern to them, an intelligence. My research suggests. She cut off as the lights suddenly went out, plunging them into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting an eerie blue glow across the room. The temperature began to drop noticeably, even in their protected space. The main power core just failed, Kira announced, her eyes glowing in the dim light. We have maybe an hour of emergency power. She pulled James closer, her fur bristling. The temperature will drop quickly now. Tell me about your research, James said, trying to keep his voice steady. What did you mean about the storms being intelligent? Kira's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I've detected patterns in the storm's behavior. It reacts to our presence, to our technology. The more we try to protect ourselves from it, the more aggressively it attacks. That's why I'm the only researcher left. The others thought I was imagining things. Another violent shake rocked the station. This time, they could hear the screech of metal stress from somewhere deep in the structure. The storm's getting stronger, James observed, like it knows we're vulnerable now. Exactly, Kira said, a note of excitement in her scientific voice despite their situation. But there's more. In all my observations, it's never attacked pairs. Single beings, groups, yes, but never pairs. It's why I insisted you share my bed beyond just the thermal necessity. I needed to test my theory. James processed this information, understanding dawning. You're using us as an experiment. For survival, she corrected. And it's working. This storm should have already torn the station apart at this intensity. But it's holding back. We're fascinating it. The emergency lights flickered ominously. James could feel Kira's heartbeat, faster than before. So what do we do now? He asked. We stay exactly like this, she replied. We observe. We survive. And maybe, just maybe, we'll understand what this planet is trying to tell us. Her voice softened. Sleep if you can, human. I'll keep watch and record what happens. For science, of course. James wanted to argue, to help somehow, but the warmth of her fur and the rhythmic sound of her breathing was oddly soothing. As he drifted toward sleep, he could have sworn he heard something in the storm's howl. A pattern, a voice, trying to tell them something important. James woke with a start. The emergency lights still cast their blue glow, but something had changed. The station's vibrations felt different, and Kira was tense against him, her ears swiveling like radar dishes. Listen, she whispered, her fur slightly bristled. The storm's changed its pattern. Through the station's walls, James could hear it. What had been a chaotic howl now had a distinct rhythm, almost like a pulse. Kira released him briefly to reach for her datapad. Look at these readings, she said, holding the screen where they both could see it. The energy patterns in the storm. They're synchronized with the station's emergency power frequency. James studied the wavelength patterns on the display. It's matching our power signature. How is that possible? Not matching, Kira corrected, her tail twitching with excitement. It's complementing it. The storm is actually feeding power back into our systems. Our emergency reserves should have been depleted hours ago, but they're holding steady. A soft humming began to fill the room, emanating from the walls themselves. The temperature, which had been steadily dropping, started to stabilize. Your theory about the storms being intelligent, James said, sitting up slightly. This proves it, doesn't it? Kira's eyes gleamed in the dim light. Yes, but it's more than that. Look at this. She pulled up another screen showing a complex series of data points. I've been collecting these patterns for months. The storm doesn't just react to technology. It tries to interface with it, but only under specific conditions, like when two different species work together, James suggested, remembering their earlier conversation. Exactly. Kira's excitement was palpable. The planet's atmosphere isn't just a weather system. It's a vast, ancient network. I believe it was created by whoever built those deep structures I detected beneath the ice, but it only fully activates when it detects cooperation between different species. The humming grew stronger, and suddenly the main lights flickered back to life. Screens around the room began activating on their own, displaying data faster than either of them could read it. It's giving us access, Kira breathed, her scientific enthusiasm overwhelming her usual stern demeanor. All this time, I've been trying to crack its code alone, but it needed this. It needed two different species working together. James watched in amazement as symbols and diagrams filled the screens, designs for technology far beyond anything he'd seen before. These look like energy manipulation systems, some kind of gravity control. More than that, Kira said, her claws dancing across her datapad. These are designs for sustainable energy systems that work in harmony with planetary atmospheres. Technology that doesn't fight against natural forces, but works with them. She turned to James, her eyes bright. This could revolutionize how both our species approach space colonization. Another change rippled through the station. The temperature began to rise to more comfortable levels, and the storm's howl transformed into a gentle hum. It's not just sharing information, James realized. It's helping us survive. Of course, Kira exclaimed. That's why the original builders created this system, to force different species to cooperate. The deadly storms, the extreme conditions, they're all part of a test. James couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. The fierce alien who had demanded he share her bed hours ago now looked more like an excited scientist who had just made the discovery of a lifetime. The question is, he said, what do we do with this information? Kira's expression grew serious. We need to document everything. When rescue comes, this could change everything for both our species. She paused, looking at him intently. But first, we should stay here. The storm might still be testing us. James nodded, settling back into their shared warmth. For science, right? For science. Kira agreed, but there was a new softness in her voice. And because you make an interesting research subject, human. Around them, the ancient planetary network continued to hum, sharing its secrets with the unlikely pair who had finally passed its test of cooperation. The first signal from a rescue ship came just as the planet's sun began to rise. James and Kira were deep in analyzing the data the station's systems had revealed when the communication alert chimed. Rescue Ship Endeavour to Lieutenant Miller, do you copy? The voice crackled through the station's speakers. Before James could respond, Kira's paw shot out, covering his hand. Wait, she said, her ears focused forward. The storm hasn't fully subsided. If they try to land now. James nodded, understanding. He activated the comm system. This is Miller. I'm alive and safe, but you can't attempt landing yet. The atmospheric conditions are still too dangerous. Our sensors show the storm is weakening, "Lieutenant," the rescue ship responded. "We can attempt an emergency extraction." Kira moved to her primary console, bringing up atmospheric readings. "They don't understand. The storm isn't weakening. It's changing phase. If they enter the atmosphere now, the planetary defense system will react." James leaned toward the comm again. "Negative, Endeavor. Do not attempt landing. The storm is part of an ancient planetary defense system. We've made a major discovery here that changes everything we thought we knew about this planet." There was a long pause before the rescue ship responded. "Please clarify, Lieutenant. What kind of discovery?" Kira pulled up the critical data on her main screen. "Tell them," she said, her tail swishing with barely contained excitement. "Tell them what we found." "This planet," James began, choosing his words carefully, "hosts an ancient atmospheric network designed to test and promote interspecies cooperation. The technology we've uncovered here could revolutionize space exploration for both our species." Another pause. "Lieutenant, are you under duress? Our scans show you're in close proximity to an unknown life form." Kira made a sound that was half growl, half laugh. "Your rescue team lacks scientific vision, human." "I'm not under duress," James replied firmly. "I'm with lead researcher Kira. She saved my life. And together we've made first contact with this planetary system. But we need time to secure the data before extraction." The storm outside shifted, its pattern changing to something more rhythmic. The station's systems responded, displays filling with new information. "See," Kira pointed to the readings. "The network is still actively sharing data. If we leave now, we might lose our connection to it." "Endeavor," James transmitted. "Maintain orbit but do not approach. We need approximately 6 hours to properly document and secure our findings. The storm will subside naturally once we've completed the data transfer." "This is highly irregular, Lieutenant," the rescue ship responded. "We have orders to." Suddenly, a burst of energy from the storm interrupted the transmission. Kira's screen showed massive power fluctuations in the atmosphere. "The network is protecting us," she said, studying the readings. "It's creating a communication barrier to prevent interference until we complete our task." James watched the swirling patterns outside the station's viewport. "How much more data do you think it has to share?" "Impossible to tell," Kira replied, her claws flying over her controls. "But every bit of it could be crucial for both our species. The rescue ship will just have to wait." Working together, they began systematically recording and analyzing the ancient system's revelations. The storm continued its protective swirl around the station, its patterns now clearly intentional and almost beautiful. "You know," James said, looking at their shared findings, "this might be the most productive night I've ever spent in someone else's bed." Kira's ears twitched in amusement. "Are you making jokes now, human? Perhaps the cold affected your brain after all." "Just trying to maintain positive interspecies relations," he replied with a smile. "Then focus on these equations," she said, but her tail swished playfully. "We have much to learn before your rescue ship returns." Above them, the Endeavor maintained its holding pattern, while below, two beings from different worlds continued their work, protected by an ancient system that had waited millennia for exactly this kind of cooperation. 6 months after the storm, the research station on planet K419 looked remarkably different. New buildings had sprouted around Kira's original outpost, their designs incorporating the ancient technology they had discovered during that fateful night. James stood at the main viewport of the new Joint Species Research Center, watching another controlled storm pattern dance across the sky. Behind him, Kira was explaining their findings to a mixed group of human and alien scientists. "The planetary network doesn't just control weather," she was saying, her tail moving with enthusiasm. "It's a teaching tool, designed to show us how different species can work together with natural forces rather than against them. And it only took nearly freezing to death to figure it out," James added, turning from the viewport with a smile. The visiting scientists chuckled, now familiar with the story of how the discovery was made. What had started as a crash landing had turned into the biggest breakthrough in cooperative space exploration in decades. Speaking of which, Kira said, her ears perking up, the network is signaling. It's time for another data exchange. She looked meaningfully at James. Care to assist, Lieutenant? The other scientists began gathering their notes, knowing from experience that the network responded best to its original discovery team. As they filed out, one young human researcher paused. Is it true you really had to share a bed to survive that first night? She asked. James and Kira exchanged glances. Sometimes, James replied, the simplest solutions are the most effective. After the room cleared, Kira moved to the central console. The storm outside had taken on the familiar rhythmic pattern they now recognized as the network's active state. You know, she said, entering commands into the system. When I first found you stumbling around in that storm, I thought you were just another troublesome human. And now, James asked, taking his position at the adjacent console. Now I think you're a troublesome human who makes an excellent research partner. Her ears twitched with amusement. The network agrees. Look at these new patterns. The screens filled with streaming data, more designs, more concepts, each one building on their previous discoveries. The ancient planetary system had proved to be an endless source of knowledge, but only when they worked together. Hard to believe this all started with you threatening my life. James mused, studying the new information. I didn't threaten your life. Kira protested, her fur bristling slightly. I saved it. Get in my bed, or you won't survive the night. James mimicked her original words. Sounds like a threat to me. Kira's response was cut off by a new surge of data from the network. The storm outside pulsed with colors they had never seen before. James, she said, suddenly serious. Look at this. The network is showing us something new about interstellar travel. They worked through the night, just as they had that first time, translating and documenting the ancient knowledge. The storm swirled protectively around the station, its patterns now as familiar as an old friend. As the planet's sun began to rise, Kira finally sat back from her console. You know what this means, don't you? With this technology, we could explore together. No more single-species missions. No more crashed ships either, James added. No more needing to be rescued. Though some rescues aren't so bad, Kira said softly, her tail brushing against his arm. The main lights dimmed as the network began its rest cycle, the storm outside settling into a gentle swirl. In the quiet moment, both scientists looked out at the planet that had brought them together. So, James said, breaking the comfortable silence, ready for bed. Kira's ears twitched in amusement. Is that a threat, Lieutenant? No, he replied with a smile. Just maintaining positive interspecies relations. Outside, the storm hummed its approval, a testament to how far they'd come from that first desperate night. What had started as a fierce demand for survival had evolved into something much more significant, a partnership that would change the future of space exploration for both their species. And it all began with those simple words, "Get in my bed, human, or you won't survive the night."